are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, but today's case is about the girl in the basement who survived after 24 years. Now, a little girl whose life suddenly shrunk from the possibilities of an entire world to the inside of a small room. This story is of a survivor whose disappearance and then reappearance shocked the world. A girl who had no chance from the beginning, but survived the mental and physical abuse against all odds in order to escape. I also want to thank our sponsor, HelloFresh. This is a meal kit delivery service that makes cooking so easy if you're like me and have just moved out on your own, or if you aren't very good at cooking or meal planning or knowing what to do when it comes to any of that. They basically have it covered for you. It takes the preparation time out of meals and gives you easy and quick recipes to make with in-detail instructions. So whether you need family-friendly, veggie, calorie-smart, or quick and easy, they have it all, and recipes can be finished in 30 minutes. Or if you choose quick and easy, it can be finished in 20 minutes. So on top of all of that, you can also save 28% by using HelloFresh instead of going to your usual grocery store. And you're also cutting out all of the waste with buying so many ingredients. So with this, you get the perfect amount that you need, and that is all. No excess to fill up your cabinets and then go bad when you never use it. So I absolutely loved trying out the meals, and they made cooking actually fun and doable for someone who has no experience. So if you would like to try it, go to HelloFresh.com and use code BrookeM12 to get 12 free meals, and that includes free shipping. So again, go to HelloFresh.com and use code BrookeM12 to get 12 free meals that include free shipping. Now, I also want to thank the Red Handed podcast, along with Real Crime Documentary and the novel Crimes of Joseph Fritzl, Uncovering the Truth by Stephanie Marsh and Pansevsky Bajon. These are really good sources that I found on this case that did not have a ton of in-detail sources. These are the best that I found. So if you would like to check them out, they're linked down below. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 1984 in Austria, and the Fritzl family lived in a small town called Amstetten. This was Joseph, who was a well-respected engineer, a man that everybody would say hello to, and he was married for 20 years at this point to his wife, Rosemary, who was a stay-at-home mother to their 7 children. Now, they had met at a party, and they danced together, they had a kiss, and then literally months later, they were married. They knew that that is what they wanted in life. They both also wanted lots of kids, so they thought that it was perfect, and they just went ahead and got married. So by this point, they had 3 sons, they had 4 daughters, but we will be talking about one of those children specifically. This was Elizabeth, who had been born as their 4th child on April 6th of 1966, but she was 18 by this time. Now, Elizabeth was known to be this wonderful little girl. She did as she was told. She was well-mannered. She was kind of quiet and more shy, but she did have some friends growing up, and she was really comfortable with those friends. As she got older, though, her grades did kind of suffer. She kind of was more of a loner, and she finished school by the age of 15. After this, she started going to a program where she was basically learning to be a waitress, but more than that, kind of be in the hospitality field, because her father had bought a hotel and she was going to work for him. But at this point, she was working as a waitress at the motorway service station nearby her family home. Then she vanished, but this wouldn't be for forever. You see, Elizabeth was always one to talk about running away when she was a teenager, and she was not joking, because at the age of 16, her and a friend who she had met through this program where she had to basically go and stay elsewhere for a few months, they had met, they had both kind of realized they wanted more with their lives. They wanted to explore, and so once they went back home, they decided that was it. They were going to run away. And so this is what they did. They ended up going all the way to Vienna, which was like this huge city compared to the small towns that they lived in. But these two girls were being searched for by the police after their parents reported them missing, and they were found and brought back to Amstetten. Now, when she returned home, Elizabeth got right back to work. She graduated, her hospitality degree for being a waitress, and she actually got a job in a place called Lynn's. This was not too far away from her family home either, yet it wouldn't be long after this that she would go missing for good. It was August 29th of that year, and Elizabeth would go missing, and she would never go back to work ever again. And her father Joseph went to the police department and reported her missing and said that he had, went home and had not been able to find her anywhere, and that she was talking about running away in a cult. However, he believed that she would never have actually run away, and so she must have been in contact with this cult, who then kidnapped her. When the rest of her family found out about her running away or her being missing, they came to Amstetten, where her immediate family lived, and they began to help look for her. In fact, basically it would be her aunt, I believe, went to all of the train stations to the homeless population to make sure she wasn't there, because she knew that most girls who ran away would end up with the homeless. However, Elizabeth wasn't with any of them, and there was no sign of her. They were running out of places to look, and it appeared as though Elizabeth didn't want to be found. So this kind of made it hard to find her, and on top of that, Elizabeth hadn't taken anything with her, which made them concerned as to how she was getting around and what she was doing without any of her belongings, including her personal identification. Then, a month after her disappearance, a letter came to the Fritzl residence. This was signed by Elizabeth herself, and this said that she ran away to join a cult, find a new life for herself, and that she didn't want anyone looking for her. She was good on her own, and if anyone did look for her, she would leave the country. That's how bad she did not want anyone to find her. She was happy where she was. This was bookmarked from a place called Brananu, which was almost 2 hours from their home. As she was 18 years old, there was not much investigators could do, because even if they found her, if she wanted to be gone, they couldn't force her to come back home. So basically, they didn't want to go and look for her because it would be a waste of time, and so they really did classify her as a runaway, and the case went cold. Her friends were very suspicious of this because they said that Elizabeth rarely went out with them. She never met new people, she was never social, and they didn't know where she would have met anyone that would have been in a cult or a cult themselves to be able to integrate into moving in with them. They said that it was highly unlikely that this is what happened, and they were right. No one could have imagined the horrors this young girl was going through, while everyone chalked up her disappearance as a teenage runaway. But years were going by, and Elizabeth was becoming an adult. She was alive. Her case seemed to be long forgotten to the police, to people of the area. Some still spoke of her, her family did. But then, many years later, local media began talking about it once again. This time, local hospitals were having doctors go on the news begging for her return. You see, they believed they had one of Elizabeth's children in their care, and they needed to figure out what was going on, and she was going to be the only one to provide that information for them. It was said that this patient was brought in on April 19th of 2008 and was a 19-year-old girl, almost the age of Elizabeth when she had disappeared. However, there was a man who had come with her who had said that her mother was Elizabeth Fritzl herself, a woman who had not been seen in 24 years. Yet this girl, whose name was thought to be Kirsten, was completely unconscious, unable to talk or tell investigators anything. She was also extremely pale and sick in ways doctors couldn't understand. They found she had epilepsy. They also found that she was suffering from kidney and lung failure, and they feared that this was a genetic disorder. However, investigators were called when they searched the databases and found that she had no records anywhere, not even medical databases, but also government databases. It appeared as though she didn't exist. She hadn't gone to school, to the doctor, gotten any sort of government paperwork, not even a birth certificate. This woman did not exist. just the same as her supposed mother didn't anymore either. For a week while Kirsten was in a coma, investigators and doctors alike had no answers. The man who had brought her had simply said that he wanted her treated so they could go home. He was saying that the last he knew of Elizabeth, she was in a cult. And so this made investigators kind of backtrack and look into Elizabeth's disappearance so many years ago, and that's when they found that a church officer who was also an expert on cults was contacted. And he had read these letters that the Fritzl family had gotten, and he was very suspicious of them. He said they were dictated, they were oddly written, and he didn't believe a cult like Elizabeth was describing within them really existed. But this man who had brought this 19-year-old girl into the hospital was saying that he had gotten a letter that had come from Elizabeth saying that she could no longer take care of her daughter, and so she dropped her off on his doorstep. Then a 40-year-old woman, around 40 years old, showed up at the hospital as well. She looked just as pale and sickly as her daughter. She had gray hair and a bit of wrinkled skin, but she looked much older than her age. But there was no doubt that this was Elizabeth Fritzl, just much older than anybody had last seen her. And this was a woman who literally vanished off the face of the earth and was just coming straight into the hospital like nothing had ever happened. She returned like a ghost in front of them, and she came to say that Kirsten was in fact her daughter, yet she didn't have any more information to give them than they already had. Now, the man who brought in Kirsten also brought in Elizabeth, and this turned out to be none other than Josef Fritzl, Elizabeth's father. Now, he claimed that Kirsten was his granddaughter and that Elizabeth had dropped her off to, give her that medical attention she needed. But he also said he went to search for Elizabeth a week later to bring her in. But investigators immediately took Elizabeth in to talk to her, and they wanted to know more about her sick daughter, and they also wanted to know where she had been all these years. Elizabeth didn't want to talk. In fact, for 5 hours, she said nothing, and then investigators told her that she would be charged with child abuse because it appeared as though she had neglected her daughter. She wasn't even in any sort of database. She hadn't gotten any treatment or help or anything. But then, using all of the courage she could muster, Elizabeth began to talk. And she said she had never been in a cult. She had never even left town. The 18-year-old girl had never even left her home. That's right, she had been living in her childhood home for the last 24 years, but it wasn't necessarily inside of her home. She had been living underneath of it. She began to explain the horrors of her living in a basement, unable to get out. She had been kidnapped by her own father. Now, Josef Fritzl, her father, was known to be this friendly man, this quiet neighbor. Everyone in the community would say hello if he walked by. They knew him, they saw him out and about, and they were excited to see him. He was excellent in his engineering jobs. He was wealthy. He would go to the bank. They knew him there. He would go to the police department. They were well aware of him there, and it was for good things, and they respected him. He was always working on something. He took care of his large family. But the only people who really got a true sneak peek of who Josef Fritzl was appeared to be his children's friends. Many of those friends who were now grown would say that Josef never let the children out to play. They would often go to the Fritzl residence, knock on the door, and Josef would meet them, and he would basically block their entrance. They could not come in, the children could not come out. And when Elizabeth was at school, her friends would say that she would always be upset. And when they tried to ask her why, she said that she could not tell them or she would get in trouble with her daddy. It turned out that Josef was born April 9th of 1935, and his mother wasn't a very nurturing soul. She would get on to him for the smallest things. She would hit him for being impulsive. She would also leave him alone for hours, for days, for long periods of time when he was young. His father had left when he was young, and so it was just him and his mother. It was also said that there were bombs hitting where they lived when he was a child, and many took shelter. However, Maria, his mother, did not care to. She didn't really mind the bombs going off, so while her child was yelling, they just stayed home listening to them falling and fearing if one would fall on their home. Meanwhile, more and more people were actually coming to stay in their home as lodgers, and his mother, Maria, began to refuse everyone entry. This was highly frowned upon, to do anything outside of what you were told to do, and so soon after, Josef's mother was put into a Nazi concentration camp, and he was sent to an orphanage. There he was told that his mother was dead and that he would basically never see her again. But when Josef was 10, he was picked back up by his mother, who had survived. But that's when the abuse was said to get worse. When he was 17, he had kind of gotten out of the home. He had met Rosemary, and they began having children together. But it's said that Josef's dark family history began much before his own parents, and his grandmother was actually a woman named Anna, who had married a rich man. The two began trying to get pregnant, and with no luck, Anna's husband began beating her. But to fix the problem, he began to sexually assault one of his servants, whom fell pregnant. Now, with no say as to what was happening to her child, this servant was sent away and basically banished. Her child was taken from her, and the baby was adopted by Anna and her husband. Anna then raised the baby as her own, and this happened 2 more times with 2 different servants, but Anna was no longer being abused because they had children. But as the children got older, Anna's husband began taking out his anger on them instead, and Maria was the youngest girl that they had, and she was the one who Anna escaped her husband with to go back to her childhood home that she had inherited. Now, while they were on their own, the economy was worse than ever before, and they actually had to rent out some of the rooms in their property to make money. At this point, Maria was getting older. Then she met a man named Josef. She wanted to prove she was fertile, because that was what made a good woman during this time. The 2 of them, Maria and her new man, Josef, then had a baby boy, who they named Josef Fritzl, a boy who would later go on to kidnap his own daughter. It was said that Josef beat his wife, Rosemary, as well, and that she once had a broken foot while she was pregnant. It was also said Josef had an obsession with Elizabeth over the rest of his children. He never let her outside of the home. He would take her everywhere with him, and he read her diary. He never let friends over or have a boyfriend, but all of his children were scared of him. They would turn quiet whenever he came home, and they were always on their best behavior around him. But for 18 months, when the kids were younger, Josef went to work on a trip and didn't even call. He just vanished. However, he did come back, and the beatings were just worse after this. But by the age of 18, Elizabeth was ready to move on with her life. But Josef wasn't going to let her do so because he had a plan. One that he had been concocting for 6 years prior. When she was only 12 years old, he knew what he was going to do with her. And he began to build an underground bomb shelter in his backyard and under his house. He got all the right documents, and no one thought this was strange because the Cold War was happening. In fact, the local council gave him a couple $1,000s for the cost. All these materials were super easy to find because that's what he did for a living. He had those contacts, and it took him 6 years. But afterwards, he had a bomb shelter that had 8 doors that were basically all going different ways and making you confused as to where you were going within the actual shelter. But if you did get to the back, you found a heavy hinged door and then a metal door with a password lock. This was impenetrable and the perfect prison. There were also 2 rooms down there, and then a kitchen and a bathroom, and there was also some electricity. But don't get it twisted, this was no 5-star hotel. This was not something that you would want to live in. And then on August 28th of 1984, a day prior to Elizabeth being reported missing, her mother Rosemary went away, and Josef asked Elizabeth for a favor. He needed help lifting a door onto the frame, and it would be quick. It was right down in the basement. She followed her father downstairs, and she helped him with this door and to put it right into place. the door that would keep her locked inside for the next 24 years. When she turned to leave, her mouth and nose were covered by a cloth, and she slowly fell asleep. When she awoke, she found herself in a dark room, handcuffed to a metal bed frame. But then where did Kirsten, her daughter, come from? It's the answer we all hoped wouldn't be true. Her father had sexually assaulted her, but it had not just been once. You see, when Elizabeth was an infant, Joseph had actually begun a life of crime. He was following women around and pleasuring himself in the parks where they couldn't see him. He also watched couples through windows who were being intimate, and then he escalated. He followed a woman into her home, held her at knife point, and sexually assaulted her. He threatened to kill her if she screamed, and he was caught and was sentenced to 18 months in prison. His wife, Rosemary, lied about it to her friends and family, saying he went abroad for work, and she stayed with him when he got out. His record was then expunged after 15 years, so nobody knew about it by this point. Elizabeth described being sexually assaulted by her father as young as 11 years old, and she said that living down there in that basement in the cold, damp air or in the sweaty sauna air with rats that she could catch in her hands was horrific. She had to use the water off of the walls, and at first she couldn't even move from the bed. She was trapped there, but then he moved the chain to her waist so she could move around a bit, and eventually he completely took the chain away so that he would have better access to sexually assaulting her. Elizabeth said that most times he would come down every day and feed her and then sexually assault her. This would happen 3,000 times, and for the first 5 years she was alone. She hardly spoke to anyone, but by the time she was 23, Elizabeth fell pregnant. And all Joseph did was give her a medical textbook and some supplies and told her to do it on her own. The baby born was Kirsten, and thankfully she survived, and so did Elizabeth. However, she would not be the only baby that Elizabeth would have. Elizabeth explained that she had 7 children while she was locked away. She had Monica, Lisa, Alexander, Stefan, and Felix. And she did have another baby who hadn't yet been given a name because he died shortly after being born. Elizabeth recalled begging her father and her captor to take him to the hospital, but he refused. After the baby died, he took him away and incinerated him in the heater on the property. Elizabeth was a wonderful mother who taught her children everything that she could. She taught them how to read and write, and she used what she had and did what she could. She had asked Joseph if he could make a bigger shelter for them with all of the kids taking up so much space, and he told them to dig the hole themselves with their bare hands. They would eat from the kitchen off of hot plates and in a small refrigerator that often broke and leaked out, making everything spoil. Slowly, Joseph let them have a TV, a radio, a cassette player, and he also brought down a bird and then snow to show the kids because they didn't get to come upstairs, but that didn't mean he wasn't being abusive towards them. In fact, if they did anything wrong, he would stop bringing them food, he would shut off the lights, and then one by one, he began taking the children out of the prison. Something Elizabeth had never gotten to do, yet they weren't returning. Elizabeth's children were being taken from her. Suddenly she had only 3, who were Kirsten, Stefan, and Felix, and they were all being told that if they tried to leave on their own, they would be gassed. They also would be shocked if they tried to mess with the metal door. But Elizabeth said she did know where her babies were going because Joseph was forcing her to write the notes. These were to her mother, Rosemary, and they were basically from Elizabeth saying she could no longer take care of the babies and wanted her mother to for her. And so they were also signed by Elizabeth herself. So one by one, Lisa, Monica, and Alexander were dropped on the doorstep. They were taken in by their grandmother and grandfather, who was actually their grandmother and real father. They were all living right above their imprisoned real mother, and they had no idea because they were all taken when they were infants and could not tell what had actually happened and where they had actually come from because they were all being taken out if they were too loud. Rosemary had once called the police after finding Monica because she had also received a phone call and heard Elizabeth's voice. She realized that she changed her phone number and that it was not listed. And so she contacted the police because she thought this was strange that Elizabeth would have gotten it. But these kids upstairs grew up like normal children. while their birth mother and other siblings were told by Yosef that they were living this amazing life. He would bring down photos of them doing fun things so that the downstairs kids would get jealous. And Elizabeth said that she didn't know why all of this was so, that her father simply chose her for himself when she was young. He would tell her if she did not do as he said, her treatment would get worse. She would not escape. He would beat her, kick her, force her to reenact scenes from violent adult films. And Elizabeth said that she tried to make it the best for her kids. She decorated their rooms so they would have something to focus on rather than the horror, and she would draw animals and flowers and make everything colorful. She had no idea how all of this was happening upstairs, that her children were just, being taken care of by her mother, and nobody was wondering anything. But it turned out that Rosemary and Yosef showed these letters written by Elizabeth to social workers. They had come to their home, read these letters, and given permission to be foster parents to these 3 children, whose mother, to everyone's knowledge, hadn't been seen in 24 years. They would visit often, and they saw nothing strange. They heard nothing strange around the home, and it was also said that the social workers were understaffed at this time. This is an excuse we see often when it comes to the negligence of social workers, but Yosef's wife and children upstairs did as they were told, and they didn't go into the basement like Yosef said. When this news came out, Elizabeth and her children were taken out of the basement and taken to a safe place. The youngest child was only 5 years old. It was Felix, and he was said to ride in the back of the cop car, and he was so excited to see the outside world that he had never seen before. But while they were all getting therapy, the media went wild. Reporters from everywhere were coming to this small town to see this monster and his victims. Yet, in court on March 16th of 2009, Yosef was brought in on charges of rape, kidnapping, incest, slavery, and murder, and showed up in the courtroom holding a folder over his face. Under Austria's law, he was able to do so. But his lawyers began to say that Yosef did all of this to Elizabeth as an act of a devoted father, that she was headed toward a life of drugs and bad company, and he was trying to protect her. He claimed that he would drive miles to another city in order to postmark the letters from Elizabeth to Rosemary without her being suspicious. He claimed he didn't know why he didn't help the baby who died right after birth. He said he just overlooked it and thought the little one would survive. His lawyer was saying he took great care of both families, and that basically he should be praised because he made sure that everybody in his upstairs family and everybody in his downstairs family had what they needed. He even changed jobs so he could have more time with his second family, and he would buy things for them. He would go towns away so nobody would see him buying groceries for them, and then he would go to the local grocery store to buy things for his upstairs family. Everything he did for each of the families was completely separate. His lawyer said that he wasn't a monster because he brought a Christmas tree down to the basement family during Christmas time. He had allegedly claimed that he always knew what he was doing was wrong and that he must have been crazy to do such a thing, yet it came to be a normal occurrence for this second life. He said he was not a beast the media was making him out to be. This was all said to be in preparation for trying to plead insanity. But this didn't work, and Yosef's sister-in-law came forward saying that she would often be at the home and she would see Yosef going into his basement, which was basically like a garage, and then the basement every morning at around 9 a.m. He said he was drawing up plans for machines to be able to sell, but he would be there until nighttime and would let no one in with him. At the same time, the Fritzl family had rented out a room in their home to make some more money, and this man had been there for 4 years. This was on the ground floor, and he always heard noises beneath him, but he was told it was the pipes, the heating system, and the thing was he also had a dog, and this dog would always perk up and look around and slowly growl, and the man would always look around to see if there was anyone outside, and there never was. He now believes that this was his dog hearing Elizabeth and the children beneath him, but he was never allowed in the garden or the basement either. He was asked why he didn't, think to ask Joseph any questions and if he ever saw anything strange, which he said he really didn't, and he always saw Joseph with shopping bags, but that wasn't something strange enough to ask about.
While 3 of the children, Lisa, Alexander and Monica, were allowed to live a normal life upstairs, Elizabeth and 3 others were kept a prisoner down here, a complex of small, windowless rooms. The jury was asked to smell items from this world to give them an idea of conditions. Fritzl's lawyer appealed to the court not to be swayed by emotions, insisting he was not a monster.
Joseph said he was born to rape and that he held himself back for a relatively long time and that he could have behaved a lot worse than just locking up his daughter. But he didn't want to go back to prison, so he took her instead. He said it was easy for him to keep it up because this double life was as easy to shut off as simply closing the door and closing the door in his mind as well. He even built a swimming pool above ground, above where Elizabeth and the children were living, for his other family to play in. He told the psychiatrist that he wanted many kids with Elizabeth because it gave him power over her, that nobody would want a woman who had 7 children, so that even if he freed her, he would always have the power. On the first day of the trial, a reporter claimed that Joseph looked around the courtroom with eyes that were piercing and chilling, and he believed that Joseph was looking around for Elizabeth, who was rumored to be coming to the trial. But she didn't really need to because her testimony had been recorded and all 11 hours would be heard. Many jurors couldn't listen for more than 2 hours at a time. They also had replacements on standby. And after hearing these 11 hours, Joseph apologized and took full responsibility. After 4 days, he was sentenced to life in prison at 74 years old in Garston Abbey. Elizabeth claimed that the day everything changed was on April 19th of 2008, while Kirsten fell unconscious, and she was finally able to talk Joseph into taking her to the hospital. Elizabeth actually got to go outside for the first time in 24 years to help Joseph put Kirsten in the back of his Mercedes, and then she was sent right back down. A week later, she begged him again to be able to see her daughter in the hospital, and this is while everybody was already asking for Elizabeth to come forward, so that day he brought everyone upstairs. When investigators took her in for questioning, it did take those 5 hours for her to speak because she made them promise she would never have to see her father again after that. It was also found that a year prior to this, Elizabeth was forced to write a letter to her mother saying that she wanted to come home, but it wasn't possible yet. Investigators believed that Joseph was planning to let them out, but he wanted to make sure that she and the children would keep his secret. It was also found that a year before he began building this prison for Elizabeth, his mother Maria had died. Now, this was theorized to be a trigger for him. Now, like we talked about, his mother was very abusive towards him, and Joseph even admitted that before she died, she lived with him and Rosemarie for many years, and he ended up locking her in the attic where she could not get out, bricking up her window, and he told neighbors she was dead. Allegedly, he kept her in there until she actually died. When it came to the survivors, Elizabeth and her 6 children, they were all said to be in good health. Kirsten did finally come out of a coma and return to health, but these children at this time were 5, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 19. They were all brought to a local clinic to get the help they deserved and be able to live a regular life. Kirsten was said to tear clumps of hair out of her head. Stefan would have panic attacks whenever the lights flickered or a door was shut. And he also couldn't stand up straight because he was 5'8" and the basement was only about 5'6" in height. Stefan and Alexander only communicated by growling, and when it came to the children who lived upstairs, they had many issues as well because they needed therapy to deal with their anger and their resentment toward their father or their grandfather and what he did to their mother and all the lies that they had grown up knowing. And they all basically just needed a semblance of normality. And so a summer camp was actually put together by firefighters so that they could learn to have fun and swim with children their age. Now, Rosemary was allowed to see them at first while they were at this treatment center, but Elizabeth finally did tell her to leave. They were all given new identities before they left, but they did leave a handmade poster saying, "We, the whole family, would like to take the opportunity to thank all of you for sympathy at our fate. Your compassion is helping us greatly to overcome these difficult times, and it shows us that there are good and honest people here who really care for us. We hope that soon there will be a time where we can find our way back to a normal life." However, due to this case being so huge in the media, the paparazzi ended up being a huge problem for the family. By 2009, they were living in the small village only known as Village X when the paparazzi broke into Elizabeth's kitchen and began taking photos of her. After this, she was of course on edge, close to a breakdown. She ended up moving and spending some time getting some more treatment at a psychiatric clinic. All of her children were still living with her at this point, and she had finally let Rosemary see the upstairs children because she knew that Rosemary was looked at, to many of them, as their mother. Even though Elizabeth didn't want anything to do with her at this time, but the next year Elizabeth did do an interview where she said that she was really trying to let Rosemary back in. She talked about how happy they all were and that she loved watching her children play outside, play video games. She had even gotten her driver's license and she loved to go shopping, and she had finally decided to forgive her mother for believing her father for all those years. Elizabeth was meant to get money from her father for everything she went through, but it turned out that her father was millions of euros in debt. Elizabeth is now said to be dating a man named Thomas Wagner, who was her bodyguard. He was 23 years younger than her. However, you have to remember that her kidnapping did stunt her mental age as well. Thomas was actually assigned to protect her and the 6 children, and she felt so secure with him that he ended up moving in with her, and they have been so happy together. As far as Josef, he is still in prison. He ended up being moved to solitary confinement for his own safety and changed his last name to Meiderhoff, and he had actually gotten into a prison fight because other inmates had set up a fake online dating profile to make fun of him, and he attacked them for it. They attacked him back. But while being interviewed in prison, he showed no sign of remorse, saying that if you looked in any family home, girls would probably be hidden in the cellars there too. Like that was a normal thing. In 2013, the basement of the Fritzl home was actually filled in with concrete so nobody else could use it for any horrible things. But by 2019, it was revealed that Josef's health was declining. Now, he was suffering from dementia. He no longer wanted to live. It was said he was totally withdrawn, barely left his cell. He didn't want contact with others, and altogether it looked as though he resigned himself to dying. However, he could still be released in 2024. Now, if you have watched the movie Room that came out in 2016, you may realize that this case sounds a lot like it. I can't confirm that this was used as inspiration for this, but I can confirm that the one on Lifetime called The Girl in the Basement was inspired by this. However, the main question many have is that how did no one know this was happening? And especially the people living above them. Well, Rosemary, the mother, has been under scrutiny after all of this came out. Some believe she knew what was happening and did nothing. Her family said that there was no way that she would let her children go through this. And she did do an interview where she said, "People have said so many things about me, but I can't speak. I just want to be left alone. I don't know where I'm heading now. My life has been ruined enough. I don't have any money. My pride is all I have left, that and my family. All I want is to keep my family." Her sister said that her whole life has been destroyed, that she is an emotional and physical wreck and never leaves her flat. It is also said she has had nothing to do with Josef since. But do you think she knew what happened to Elizabeth all those years ago? Or do you think she was just as much a victim as her daughter was? Many say it was because of her abusive husband that she didn't do anything even though she knew about it. But we don't know. We don't know if that's the truth. But it seems baffling that nobody would have known that an entire family was living beneath their feet. I think this is one of the most sickening survival cases we have done. If you don't know, I do a whole series of these on my channel. I will have the playlist linked down below, but this one is by far just the hardest to grasp. As a father did this to his own daughter. but I'm happy to hear that her and the children are living the best lives that they can at this point, and I just wish them the absolute best with their future. So don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.